Drink up. It'll help with nerves, my stepfather Craig insisted, watching me a little too closely as he handed me the travel mug. The coffee smelled off, sharp and metallic in a way that made my stomach twist. My name is Hudson Bishop. I'm 26, still living with my mom and Craig in Missoula, Montana. Not exactly where I imagine myself post-grad, but I've been saving up, building a portfolio, and now, finally, I had an interview for a marketing coordinator position at Granite Peak Outfitters, the outdoor brand I'd admired since college. I adjusted my tie, trying to ignore the way Craig was studying me. "Thanks. I'll take it to go," I said, keeping my voice light. The mug felt heavier than usual in my hand. Craig leaned against the kitchen counter, arms crossed. "Big day. Wouldn't want anything to throw you off." It sounded supportive, but his eyes told a different story. That was Craig in a nutshell. Former contractor, now full-time realist, as he liked to call himself. He married my mom 4 years ago and made it clear early on that he didn't think much of my chosen path. 4 years in school to make flyers, he'd say, or real work doesn't happen behind screen. Try a shovel sometime. I nodded, grabbed my portfolio, and headed for the door. Mom had left early for her nursing shift, so it was just me and Craig in the house, and that mug of coffee that didn't smell quite right. At the gas station 2 blocks away, I pulled over, popped the lid, and dumped the coffee into a nearby bin. The liquid inside was darker than it should have been, with an oily surface that caught the morning light. My hands trembled slightly as I put the lid back on. This wasn't the first time I'd felt that tight, uneasy feeling around Craig. 2 weeks ago, I'd been searching his truck for jumper cables and found a small, worn bottle tucked under the seat. The label was gone, but the bottle was familiar. Sleep aids, the kind that didn't mess around. I put it back exactly how I found it and didn't mention it. But today, that memory came rushing back. As I waited at the next red light, I glanced at my watch. Still enough time to swing by and get a real coffee before the interview. I couldn't prove anything, not yet. But my gut had been whispering for months, and this morning it was yelling. Craig didn't want me to succeed. He didn't want me to get this job, because if I did, I'd move out. And if I moved out, Mom wouldn't need him around so much. I'd suspected for a while that Craig saw me as competition, not for anything material, but for my mother's time and attention. What I hadn't realized until the day was just how far he might go to make sure I stayed under his roof. It hadn't always been this way. For most of my life, it was just Mom and me. We lived in a modest 2-bedroom on the east side, and she worked double shifts at St. Patrick Hospital to make ends meet after my dad left when I was 3. I barely remember him, just a vague voice and the smell of pine aftershave. Mom met Craig during a renovation project at the hospital. He was working on the East Wing, and she came home one day all smiles, talking about this polite contractor who'd asked her to coffee. I was genuinely happy for her. After more than 2 decades alone, she deserved something good. And for the first year, Craig seemed like that good thing. He fixed the broken faucet, helped repaint the living room, took Mom out to nice dinners, and even helped me move into my college dorm. "Good to see a young man aiming high," he said, though he followed it with, "Just remember, there's no shame in learning a trade if this marketing stuff doesn't pan out." The cracks started showing when I moved back in after graduation. The job market was tight, and what I thought would be a few months turned into over a year. I freelanced where I could, small projects, social media gigs, anything to build experience. But to Craig, none of it counted. "How much did that one pay?" he'd ask after a freelance job, then laugh under his breath when I told him. If I stayed up late editing campaign mock-ups or preparing pitches, he'd walk by and mutter, "Burning the midnight oil for likes and logos?" Mom noticed the tension, but she tried to smooth things over. "He just wants you to have a stable future," she'd tell me. His dad was hard on him about work, too. Maybe that was true, but lately, things had crossed the line. Like the time my alarm mysteriously failed the morning of a Zoom pitch. Or the morning I found my project files had been deleted from my laptop. Craig had been in the room the night before, saying he needed to borrow the charger. And now this coffee. That bitter edge. The heavy mug. The oily sheen. It wasn't proof. Not the kind you could take to someone. But it was enough for me. Today wasn't just a job interview. It was a chance to get out, to finally carve space for myself. Craig's passive-aggressive jabs, his subtle sabotage, the strange unease that clung to me in his presence. I was done with all of it. If Granite Peak offered me the job, I'd take it. No more second-guessing. No more excuses. The light turned green. I exhaled slowly, eyes locked on the road ahead. Whatever Craig's reasons, whatever his past, none of it was going to stop me today. I'd worked too hard for this. Files would randomly shift folders on my laptop. The Wi-Fi would cut out during video calls. Technology, huh? Craig would say with a shake of his head. Unreliable. But it started happening too often to be coincidence. Last month, I got a message from Granite Peak Outfitters. They'd come across a redesign I'd shared online. A concept mock-up for their summer catalog. They wanted me to interview for the marketing coordinator role. It was the exact job I'd been dreaming about for years. When I told Mom, she wrapped me in a long, quiet hug. "I always knew you'd find your way," she whispered into my shoulder. Craig was at the sink doing dishes, his back turned. He didn't even glance over. "Don't count your chickens," he said flatly. That night, I heard them arguing through the wall. I was sitting on my bed, reviewing my portfolio one last time, but I stopped when I caught my mom's raised voice. "Why can't you just be happy for him?" Craig's response came slower, quieter, but sharp enough to cut through. "This isn't a real career opportunity. He needs to face reality." I lay awake staring at the ceiling, realizing something I hadn't let myself believe until then. Craig didn't just think I was wasting time. He wanted me to fail. And worse, he might be trying to ensure it. The morning of the interview, I was up before dawn. My one good suit was pressed, shoes polished, and my materials reviewed so many times I could recite them in my sleep. This wasn't just another job. This was a brand that had inspired me since high school. The hiking gear I saved up for, the catalogs I'd studied like textbooks, the brand that first made me want to tell stories through design. I stepped into the kitchen at 6:30. Craig was already there, dressed in his usual work boots and flannel, pouring coffee into a pot that hadn't been used since Christmas. "Big day," he said, still facing the counter. "Thought you could use some fuel." He'd never made coffee for me. Ever. Not once. And now, on the most important day of my life, he was going out his way. A strange coldness settled over me. "That's thoughtful," I said, watching as he reached for my travel mug, the one I'd bought with my first freelance paycheck. He poured the dark liquid into it with precision. No spill, no wasted drop. "Special blend," he added with a smile that didn't touch his eyes. "Should help with the nerves." He handed it to me. For a second, our eyes locked. I saw it then. Something flickering beneath his calm. Not concern. Not pride. Satisfaction. Maybe even anticipation. His gaze flicked down to the mug and back up like he was waiting for something. I lifted the mug slowly, pretending to blow on it. The smell hit me right away. Bitter, chemical, sharp. That same metallic trace I'd caught on his breath before, when he slept past noon or stumbled a bit too much after dinner. It matched the unmarked pills I'd once found in his truck. And just like that, every moment from the past year began to thread together. The alarm that failed on the morning of my client presentation. The sudden nausea before a video interview. The disappearing files. It wasn't just me being forgetful or unlucky. It was sabotage. I smiled calmly. "Thanks. I'll take it to go." As I walked out the door with the mug in my hand, I felt an unexpected peace settle in. No racing heart. No fight or flight. Just absolute clarity. Craig had been trying to break me down. But he hadn't. Not yet. And he wouldn't. At the gas station a few blocks away, I parked behind the building, popped the lid off the mug, and poured the coffee into the trash. The liquid soaked through crumpled napkins and greasy wrappers, leaving an oily shimmer behind. I rinsed the mug with bottled water and tossed it into the back seat. Then I walked across the street to the cafe and bought a fresh cup of plain black coffee. 30 minutes later, I was sitting in Granite Peak's waiting area, my portfolio balanced on my knees. I wasn't reviewing it. I didn't need to. I was going through every strange moment from the past year and how I'd brushed them off as bad luck. But I saw it all now, clear as day. When the hiring manager called my name, I stood tall. I was done second-guessing myself. This wasn't just about a job anymore. This was about taking back control. The interview passed in a steady, confident blur. I explained how I'd reimagined their summer campaign, shared mock-ups tailored for social platforms, and discussed how the brand could lean into storytelling to build loyalty. My words didn't feel rehearsed. They felt earned, like they'd been waiting for a moment like this. "So, Hudson, where do you see yourself in 5 years?" the marketing director asked toward the end. "Building something real," I answered. "Crafting campaigns that actually mean something to people. Not just ads, but experiences they remember." I left the building 3 hours later with a formal offer in hand and a start date in 2 weeks. Driving home, I thought about Craig again. Thought about the way he looked at me this morning, waiting for me to take a sip. But I wasn't angry. I didn't need to be, because this time I'd seen it coming. And this time, I'd chosen not to drink. This time I won. I stepped through the front door that evening, still floating on the high of getting the offer. The starting salary was solid, benefits after 90 days, and more than anything, it was a real chance to prove myself at a company I respected. My mind was already racing ahead, mentally packing my things, working out a budget, how soon I could afford my own place. Then I heard it, a low, sick sound that stopped me cold. Retching. Craig was slumped on the living room couch, a plastic bucket between his knees, his face pale and sweaty. The mug, my travel mug, sat on the table beside him, empty. He looked up slowly, eyes narrowing when he saw me. "You're back," he muttered, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "Got the job," I said evenly. "Start Monday." Something shifted in his expression. At first, surprise, then something colder. He gave a stiff nod and leaned forward over the bucket again. My mom stepped in from the kitchen, concern etched across her face. "Hudson, you're home. How did it go?" "They offered me the position on the spot," I said, trying to keep my voice steady even though pride was bubbling in my chest. She pulled me into a hug. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. I knew you could do it." Over her shoulder, I watched Craig. He wasn't looking at us, just staring down at the floor, his hands hanging limp over the bucket. "What's going on with him?" I asked quietly once Mom stepped back. "Food poisoning, maybe," she whispered, glancing in Craig's direction. "He's been sick all day. Won't say much." "All day," I repeated. "Since morning. Right after you left," she said. "He said he felt fine, and then suddenly he was bolting for the bathroom. He's barely left the couch since." I nodded slowly, my mind already making the connection. Craig must have helped himself to the pot of coffee after I walked out. His own sabotage turned on him. The very coffee he'd prepared for me. That night, once the house was quiet and Mom had gone to bed, I sat down at my desk and opened the drawer where I'd stashed the bottle from Craig's truck, the one with no label. I'd swapped it out weeks ago with an identical, empty one. At the time, I hadn't known why. Just a precaution. But now I was glad I had. The small white pills inside matched the chalky residue I'd noticed at the bottom of the coffee mug. Crushed sleep aids, or worse. Mixed into the brew. Enough to dull focus, make someone miss an interview, or even look intoxicated if they made it there. It was all too clear now. The next morning, Craig avoided looking at me. He sat at the table picking at his toast, moving slower than usual. "Feeling better?" I asked, pouring cereal into a bowl. "Fine," he muttered, not glancing up from his phone. "That's good," I said. "I've got a few apartment listings to check out today. Want to find a place before I start the new job." His head shot up. "Already? You just got the offer yesterday." "No sense wasting time," I said, sitting down across from him. "I've saved enough for a deposit and first month's rent. Should be out of your hair by the end of the week." His jaw tightened. "Your mother will miss having you around." "I'll be across town," I replied. "Sunday dinners still work." Craig didn't respond right away. He leaned back in his chair, setting the toast down. "You know, entry-level jobs can be risky. Companies hire young people, overwork them, and let them go before benefits even kick in. Might be smarter to stay here a little longer. Build a cushion." And there it was. The same control, cloaked in concern. Months of subtle sabotage hadn't worked. Now he was trying to reel me back in with logic and guilt. But it was too late. "Thanks for the advice," I said, "but it's time." That afternoon, I toured a small studio apartment just 10 minutes from Granite Peak's headquarters. It wasn't fancy, but it was clean, affordable, and, most importantly mine, The landlord liked that I had a full-time job lined up and approved my application on the spot. I signed a lease, wrote the check I'd been saving up for months, and pocketed the keys. When I got home, Craig was in the garage, working under the hood of his truck. I didn't say a word. I just walked in, slipped a folded note into the open top drawer of his toolbox, and left. The note was short, just a single sentence. "You should really label your pills next time." I never expected a response. Didn't want one. I just wanted him to know that I knew, and that I was done playing his game. The note read, "Whatever you were hoping to ruin didn't work." 3 days later, I was in the middle of packing up my room when Mom appeared in the doorway. Her face looked tired, drawn tight around the eyes, like she hadn't slept properly in days. "Can we talk?" she asked softly, sitting down on the edge of my bed. I nodded, setting down the stack of books I've been boxing up. "Craig told me something this morning," she said, her tone strangely measured. "He said you've been hostile toward him, that you left a threatening note in his toolbox. He sat beside here. Did he tell you what was in the coffee he made for me the morning of my interview?" She blinked, confused. "What are you talking about?" "The coffee he insisted I drink. The one he ended up getting sick from after I left." She glanced toward the door, then back at me. "He said it was food poisoning. Something from the diner." "He never went to a diner, Mom. He was home the whole time, making that coffee for me." I got up, walked to my desk drawer, and pulled out the unmarked pill bottle I've been holding on to. I placed it gently in her hand. "I found this in his truck weeks ago. These pills. Same powdery residue I found in the bottom of my mug." She stared down at the bottle, then looked up at me, her expression unreadable. "That's a serious accusation, Hudson." "I know," I said. "That's why I haven't said anything until now. I don't have proof he meant to drug me. But then why bring it up?" "Because it's not the first time," I said before she could finish. My alarm mysteriously resetting before interviews. Important files just vanishing. The Wi-Fi cutting out only during video calls. It wasn't coincidence. Mom's face paled. "He wouldn't," but her voice didn't sound convinced. "At first, I thought it was just disapproval." I continued. "He doesn't like my career, thinks it's pointless. But it's more than that. It's not just resentment." She stood, pacing a small line across the room. "It doesn't make sense. Craig's always wanted what's best for both of us. For you, maybe," I said gently. "But for me, I've always been a threat. He's been competing with me since the beginning." She turned sharply. "Competing for what?" "For your attention, your respect, maybe even your money." "My money?" she asked, stunned. I hadn't planned to bring this part up yet, but now that we were here, I couldn't hold back. "When was the last time you checked your savings account? Or looked at your retirement fund?" Her eyes narrowed slightly, uncertainty clouding her expression. "Craig handles all the bills," she said quietly. "He says it just stresses me out." I nodded slowly. "Last month, I saw a letter from the bank. An overdraft notice. That didn't make sense to me. You've always been careful with money. You planned for everything." Then I started paying closer attention. New tools he didn't need. Fishing trips with old buddies. Cash he always seemed to have despite working fewer hours. Her face drained of color as realization started to dawn. "When was the last time you actually saw a bank statement?" I asked. She sat down hard on the bed. "How did I not see it?" "I think you did," I said. "But you trusted him." Silence stretched between us. Then Mom looked up at me, her eyes clearer, her voice firmer. "Show me everything." And I did. Over the next hour, I laid it all out. The sabotage, the financial red flags, how Craig would casually isolate her from old friends, always under the guise of convenience. I explained how he'd subtly redirected me toward dead-end gigs while quietly interfering with anything promising. She listened, asked questions, took it all in. "I thought he was being protective," she whispered. "I thought he cared." "He does," I said, "but not about us. About control." And the more I resisted, the worse it got. She stood again, back straight, and walked to the door. "I need to make some calls. To the bank. To someone who can help me sort this out." I nodded, the weight in my chest lifting a little. I'd been prepared to walk away and leave her behind, still caught in Craig's shadow. But now her eyes were open. She was ready. "What about your apartment?" she asked, pausing in the doorway. "When do you move in?" "Saturday," I said. But if you need me, she held up a hand. No, you need to start your life. Hudson, I'll handle mine. I nodded again, watching her walk out of the room. Something had shifted between us. For years, I'd been the one who needed protection, who she worried about. But now we were equals, standing together, not against each other. Allies. The next few days passed in a blur of boxes, lease documents, and final goodbyes. A strange, quiet tension settled over the house. Craig seemed to sense that something had shifted, but he couldn't quite pin down what. He watched both Mom and me more than usual, his constant commentary replaced with silent scrutiny. I kept packing, finalizing arrangements for the move. Mom spent long hours on the phone, speaking in hushed tones or stepping into the backyard, so Craig couldn't overhear. Twice, she made solo trips to the bank and returned with a new firmness in her expression, a quiet resolve that hadn't been there before. On Thursday night, just 2 days before my move, I was making a sandwich in the kitchen when she came in, closing the door softly behind her. I opened a new account, she whispered, glancing toward the living room where Craig sat watching television. I transferred what was left of my savings. It wasn't much. I stopped mid-slice. How much is missing? Almost 20,000, she said, her voice tight. Over the past 3 years. He kept the amounts just low enough to avoid triggering alerts. And he forged my signature on a few of the transfer forms. My stomach turned. That was her retirement. Her future. The bank is investigating, she continued. I've frozen every account he had access to. What about the mortgage, the utilities? Covered, she said. All switched to my new account. I nodded, impressed, and a little surprised by how quickly she'd taken control. What's your plan? I'm meeting with a lawyer Monday, she said. After you're gone. After I know you're safe. There was a protectiveness in her tone that caught me off guard. For so long, I'd been the one trying to protect her. I can stay, Mom. Help you through this. She shook her head firmly. No, you need to start your job. Start your life. I'll let him hold us both back for too long. The next night, my last under their roof, Craig finally confronted me. I was loading boxes into my car when he walked into the garage, a beard dangling from one hand. So you're really doing this? He said, leaning against the doorframe. Running off to play office hero with the outdoor crowd? I closed the trunk. It's a good opportunity. Your mother's upset, you know, he said smoothly. Thinks you're abandoning her. The manipulation was obvious now. Like a threadbare trick he couldn't stop using, even when it no longer worked. Actually, I said, she's proud of me. Said, so herself. His eyes narrowed. You've been different this week. Both of you. Whispering. Hiding things. I shrugged. Just busy with the move. He took a step closer. I saw the note. In my toolbox. Think you're clever, huh? Just observant, I said, matching his stare. You know, jobs fall through all the time. He said, his voice suddenly lower, harder, especially when people aren't reliable, when they start missing days, showing up impaired. The implication hung between us like smoke. A flicker of old fear stirred in my chest, but I pushed it down. That would be unfortunate, I replied. Almost as unfortunate as a bank audit turning up forged withdrawal slips. His face drained of color. Or a doctor wondering what kind of stomach virus mimics the effects of sleep, AIDS, and alcohol combined. His jaw clenched. You don't know what you're talking about. Maybe not, I said, stepping past him. But Mom's lawyer might. My heart was racing, but my steps were steady as I walked back into the house. I'd said more than I meant to, maybe too much, but it felt necessary. Craig needed to know that the game had changed, that people were finally paying attention. That night, I heard them arguing through the wall. Their voices rose and fell, sharp and fast, like they were both trying to get ahead of something crumbling. I didn't try to listen. Whatever happened next was theirs to sort out. The next morning, I loaded the last of my things into the car. Mom met me in the driveway. She hugged me tight and pressed a small envelope into my palm. A housewarming gift, she said. Don't open it until you get there. Craig was visible through the living room window, sitting stiffly in his chair. He didn't come out, just watched from behind the glass like nothing had happened. As I pulled out of the driveway, I felt something lift from me. Not just the weight of leaving home, but the years of walking on eggshells, the fog of someone else's control. For the first time in a long time, it felt like both Mom and I were moving forward. Not just surviving, but choosing something better. 3 weeks into my new role at Granite Peak, I had a routine. My studio apartment was small but quiet. I found a coffee shop nearby, where I did my early planning before work, and every Friday, I grabbed dinner with a couple of teammates who shared my love for design. The apartment was small, but it was mine. For the first time in years, I felt like I was contributing to something real. The marketing team at Granite Peak actually valued my ideas. I wasn't just showing up, I was building something. Slowly, steadily. Mom and I kept in touch every few days. She filed for divorce the Monday after I moved out. Same day, she met with her lawyer. Craig hadn't taken it well. His reactions swung from explosive anger to pathetic pleas, promising he could change. He keeps saying it was all a misunderstanding, she told me during one call. That he was just borrowing the money, planning to pay it back. I didn't respond. We both knew that wasn't true. Then one Thursday evening, as I was heading home from work, my phone rang. Mom's voice came through, steadier than I'd heard in a long time. "It's done," she said. "The police just left." My hand tightened on the wheel. "What happened?" "The bank's investigation came through," she said. "They found forgery on 11 withdrawal slips and prescription medication in the house that doesn't belong to either of us." I pulled over to the side of the road and let the words settle. "Is Craig gone?" "They arrested him an hour ago," she said. "I'm at Aunt June's now. I'll stay with her for a while." After we hung up, I sat quietly in the car, watching the lights stretch across the mountains, turning the sky gold and purple. I thought about that morning. The coffee, the smell, the weight of the mug. How close I'd come to drinking it. How easily things could have ended differently. But they didn't. What I felt wasn't satisfaction. It was something quieter. Relief. Closure. The kind that doesn't arrive with fireworks. Just a deep exhale after holding your breath for too long. Later that night, a photo came through on my phone. Mom and Aunt June were sitting on the porch of the old farmhouse where she'd grown up, both of them smiling. The message said, starting over, "Thank you for showing me how." I set the phone down and looked around my apartment. The walls were still mostly bare, the furniture a mix of thrift store finds and hand-me-downs. But it was clean, honest, mine. Sometimes the best kind of justice isn't about striking back. It's about stepping forward, building something better. 6 months later, I stood in the conference room at Granite Peak, presenting my pitch for the winter campaign. I put everything into it. Real customer stories, moments where our gear had actually mattered. Hikes, rescues, memories. The kind of marketing that made people feel something. "This really aligns with our core values," the marketing director said as I wrapped up. "We want you to lead the campaign." As I packed up my laptop, my phone buzzed. A message from Mom with a photo. She stood in front of a small brick building, holding a shiny new set of keys. "Signed the lease today. Coffee shop opens next month." After recovering most of her savings through the divorce settlement, she decided to chase the dream she'd shelved 2 decades ago. A cafe of her own. She'd moved to Bozeman, close enough to visit, far enough to start fresh. I smiled as I texted back, "Proud of you." So much had changed. Craig had taken a plea deal, probation, restitution payments for the money he stole. Last I heard, he'd moved to Wyoming, working quiet construction gigs and keeping his head down. That evening, I hiked up to the ridge just outside Missoula. The air carried the sharp scent of pine and the early hint of winter. I reached the overlook as dusk fell, the city lights starting to blink on below like scattered fireflies. I sat on a flat stone, feeling the cold press into my back and the calm of high altitude settle into my chest. I thought about the silence, the wait, the coffee mug, and all the moments in between. The slow, invisible battles I'd fought and finally started to win. Not just against Craig, but against the doubts I used to carry like a second skin. The fear that I'd never be good enough, that I should settle. Sometimes victory doesn't roar. It doesn't announce itself with trumpets or applause. It whispers, in the way your voice no longer shakes, in the way your mother smiles again, in the way the world no longer feels like something to survive, but something to shape. I I reached into my backpack and pulled out the travel mug, the one from that morning. I turned it over in my hands, feeling the cool metal, the scratch near the handle. I kept it all this time, a reminder of how close I'd come, of the turning point that started everything. I placed it on the ridge, tucked gently among the stones, and stood. Then I walked back down the mountain, each step a little lighter than the last.